We know that we have a problem. The natural world has a problem. For the earth, we are the problem. Human action has led to global warming. Every year for the past 15 years, the winter has been different. There have been times in February when high temperatures reached the 80s in this area. Some winters were back-to-back blizzards. Some were warm, some were icy, some were rainy, and some were very dry. A few have been erratic, like this one, with a very cold spell at the beginning and consistently warm days thereafter. The consequence of global warming is erratic weather patterns. Multiple snowstorms in Los Angeles, California, followed by flooding. This is not natural. This is what it's going to be looking like. And the meteorologists on television cannot predict what the weather is going to be. I've seen this so many times this past winter, and the winter before, where we were told the weather was going to be one form, and then 12 hours later, it was entirely different. They don't know what's going to happen because their models are from past, before global warming became real. And so what they're doing is modeling what normally happens. Nothing is natural, nothing is normal. Every day we read about the extinction of species or potential extinction, the damage that plastic waste is doing to the oceans, the loss of ecosystems, the contamination of drinking water by man-made chemicals, the pollution from burning fossil fuels, rising waters due to melting of the ice caps. The future of this earth looks grim. We live our lives as before, knowing that we have places to be, things to do, wages to earn. There is a temptation not to read the dire warnings of scientists because what is happening is so large that it could take more than anything we can imagine in human history to change our behaviors on a global scale. We knew this was coming. In 1971, I was in third grade, and I was learned about the threat of global warming then. Mind you, Richard Nixon was still in the White House, and 8-year-old me knew that global warming was likely to happen. I wanted things to change immediately because the world needed humanity to change. As a child, I believed that we would be making great strides to reverse global warming. I am now 60 years old, and the world still has not changed, and I cannot understand why this is so. Human beings have a problem. We live on a planet that we are destroying at an amazing rate. There's no other Earth to go to. That's not realistic for us. We have a disconnection to the Earth. We cannot survive, though, if we continue doing the things that we are doing. We will survive as a species, probably. But survival does not necessarily mean thriving. Our problem is ultimately the same one that addicts experience, that of disconnection. We are disconnected from the root of our origins. We are disconnected from our connections to other forms of life. If it flies, swims, crawls, walks, hops, or slinks, then some part of its DNA, the double helix that defines animal life at least, or most life, is identical to some part of you. Your ancestors lived in the forest and eventually wandered out. Your ancestors, our ancestors, learned to make things and to change their environment. Because they were naked apes who could make things, they thought themselves superior and created culture to divide them from the natural world from whence they came. They disconnected from the earth and imagined that they could tame nature to their will. And they did it quite well. This connection became enshrined in the documents of culture. Lynn White was an American historian who studied the medieval period in Europe. Though this does not seem relevant to science, Lynn White gave a lecture to the American Association for the Advancement of Science on December 26th, the day after Christmas, 1966, and the lecture was entitled "The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis." Did you know that we were facing an ecological crisis in 1963? Lynn White stated that the environmental crisis was in part caused by Western, particularly Christian mindset that disconnected us from the natural world. Lynn White stated that Judeo-Christian faith had normalized exploitation of the natural world by asserting humanity's dominion over nature and establishing a trend of anthropocentrism. White also asserted that Christianity makes a distinction between humanity, formed in God's image, and the rest of creation, which has no soul or reason, and is thus inferior. Regardless of one's theological views, these concepts permeate Western thought. We have a problem that is at the root of our culture. What we are doing to the earth, though, is also what we are doing to ourselves. We need this planet. We need the earth. We are not beings distant from the environment. We eat, drink, breathe, and all those processes are dependent upon the natural world, even though we may not always be aware of it. We have contact with the earth every moment of our existence. We depend upon trees and the oceans to convert carbon dioxide to breathable air, and we are making it difficult for that process to happen. We are in this crisis due to our spirituality. For too long, Western people, the people of European descent, have viewed the world as something to be used and thrown away. The book of Genesis tells that humans have dominion over the earth, and humanity has accomplished that very well, and with disastrous effects. This mindset is not unique to Christians in our culture. It is so pervasive that even people who are skeptical of traditional religion are still held in the mindset that the earth is something to be used and that humanity is so superior that anything that advances science and power is permissible. Lynn White did not hold much confidence in our ability of other world religions to change the relationship with nature. He wrote, "I personally doubt that disastrous ecological backlash can be avoided simply by applying to our problems more science and more technology. Our science and technology have grown out of Christian attitudes toward man's relation to nature, which are almost universally held not only by Christians and neo-Christians, but also by those who finally regard themselves as post-Christians. Despite Copernicus, all the cosmos rotates around our little globe. Despite Darwin, we are not, in our hearts, part of the natural process. We are superior to nature, contemptuous of it, willing to use it for our slightest whim. The newly elected governor of California, and he means Ronald Reagan, like myself a churchman, but less troubled than I, spoke for the Christian tradition when he said, as is alleged, when you've seen one redwood tree, you've seen them all. These are the realities of our current ecological crisis. Lynn White was probably right about our cultural baggage. We cannot escape it, but maybe we can re-examine parts of it that might challenge our attitude about our relationship with the earth. Lynn White was not a religious skeptic. In his now famous essay, he stated that another strain of thought existed in Western religious tradition the example of St. Francis of Assisi, who sought a sense of equality between humans and the natural world. St. Francis of Assisi had a different perspective on the relationship between nature and humanity, and please overlook the gendered language that Lynn White uses. He writes, possibly we should ponder the greatest radical in Christian history since Christ, St. Francis of Assisi. The prime miracle of St. Francis is the fact that he did not end at the stake, as many of his left-wing followers did. He was so clearly heretical that a general of the Franciscan order, Saint Bonaventure, a great and prospective Christian, tried to suppress the early accounts of Franciscanism. The key to an understanding of Francis is his belief in the virtue of humility, not merely for the individual, but for mankind as a species. Francis tried to depose man from his monarchy over creation and set up a democracy of all creatures. With him, the ant is no longer simply a homily for the lazy. Flames a sign of the thrust of the soul toward union with God. Now they are brother ant and sister fire, praising the Creator in their own ways as brother man does in his. White tells us that our spirituality as Western people still has roots in a cultural view that might strengthen us for the journey ahead. White is telling us that we need a spiritual relationship with the natural world, not something abstract and disconnected. We, technologically sophisticated, reasonable human beings, need the natural world for spirituality. We need the natural spaces to lose for a moment the crust of civilization and to inspire our greatest selves. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was for a time a Unitarian minister, wrote about the spiritual need for the natural world out of his own experience. He writes, crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear. In the woods, too, a man casts off his years as the snake his sloth, and at what period soever of life is always a child, and the words is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, leaving me my eyes, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. Briefly put, we selfishly need the natural world to live in awe of the universe and find humility within ourselves. Emerson was telling us about the spirituality of being in nature, becoming one spiritually with the natural world. This is not always a simple thing for some of us, especially those of us who have little previous experience with the natural world, other than their own backyards. Being with nature, though, is important for our human spiritual needs, and also for the natural world. If we are to change the environmental crisis in which we are currently careening toward without regard to sanity, a personal relationship is needed with the natural world. Our disconnection in this human-centered world from nature hampers our ability to care. Too often, lives in this society revolve around busyness, technology, and other matters, and it is too easy to forget the natural world. In clinical pastoral education, part of ministerial training, when the student acts as a chaplain, I learned that when someone is suffering, that it helps just to listen, just to be with the one that is suffering. The natural world is suffering, and maybe the only way we can care enough to act for the restoration of the natural order is to listen and just be with nature. Though the problems of the environmental crisis have to be dealt with in our cultural context, other religious traditions can also help us along the way. Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh gave us a potential path in mindfulness. He quotes the Sutra of Mindfulness. When walking, the practitioner must be conscious that he is walking. When sitting, the practitioner must be aware that he is sitting. When lying down, the practitioner must be aware that he is lying down. No matter what position one's body is in, the practitioner must be aware of that position. Practicing thus, the practitioner lives in direct and constant mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness is not only about the body, though. It is about being present in the moment, experiencing reality in every second, absorbing what is happening right now, being where you are, who you are, with others. However, how often are you not present in the moment, but living and being somewhere else? Mindfulness, being completely present and aware, is necessary if we are to find the spiritual path that respects the earth. So many times I have entered the natural world with my human concerns and transitioned to becoming one and aware of the beauty around me, lost the ability to recall human thoughts, and just listened and been with the earth for a moment. This is not something deliberate, as an exercise in mindfulness might be. It just happened. When I was much younger, I took a brief hike by myself along a mountain trail in the Allegheny Mountains. It was after a storm had passed. The air was still, and the woods seemed quieter than usual. Like Emerson, I became lost in nature, more aware of the sounds, smells, textures, warmth that surrounded me. All my human concerns were suspended, just being present in that moment. As I walked along the trail, I felt as one with the woods and the animals. At one point along the trail, I heard a sound, not a loud sound, but a sound that I had not heard before. I looked down with some trepidation. After all, there are snakes. Near my foot was a caterpillar crawling over a dead leaf. It sounded like somebody stomping through the forest. That is what it is really like to be truly listening to the earth, to be aware that there's life all around you, and that you are part of that life, and you connect with it. If humanity is to regain its relationship with the earth, then we need to be aware of what the earth is telling us. If humanity is to act in ways that might bring harmony with the earth, then we need to listen, to just be present. The earth needs us to listen, and we need the earth to speak. Like being with other humans, when we listen and are present, we realize that we were never disconnected, never completely apart. What befalls the earth befalls us too. The problems of our environmental crisis will require action. Let us be present enough to be aware and also to care. I will close today with this poem by Mary Oliver that speaks to us on this Earth Day next week. She writes, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.